can you sing a little tune of that song?
Olvidarte de un amor que no se va a acabar, de estar con todo el mundo, na 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 na.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 69 of the Iga and Carlos Tennis Show. This is your host, Vansh, and it's been a long time since we've recorded one of these. Our last episode was in October of last year. It was after Carlos won the US Open. And, there are reasons for that. Obviously, tennis has been ongoing since. There have been some great champions, some very interesting results. The landscape of both tours is quite intriguing right now. But for reasons aside from the tennis, we haven't been able to do it, and it's a very sad way to start this show of what is supposed to be a really happy moment in the career of Carlos Alcaraz. But my co-host and our beloved member of the tennis community, and I'm sure all of you guys have heard this news. If you haven't already, it's really sad to announce the passing of our dear friend Damian Kust. Who's been just such a rock for not only this show, for so much of tennis media. He'll be revered and remembered forever. His legacy, everything that he achieved in this game, and at such a young age, and the way he was able to have such a big impact on many players, media, and all of his work. It will be really hard to replace. And if you're looking on the right of me right now, and you're watching this on YouTube, you will see a familiar face in Carlos Navarro, a man we've had on the show before. He writes for Puta de Break. He does an amazing job with all of his work. Big fan of his, and huge friend of Damian and I. And it's only fitting that we keep this show going. And I could think of no other better guest to have on here today and for future episodes than Carlos himself. So Carlos, thank you so much for doing this and for honoring Damian's legacy.
Hi, man. Vansh, how are you doing? The pleasure is all mine. It's honestly a pleasure, as you said, and yeah, we're talking about Damian. To fill in Damian's shoes, it's completely impossible. He's irreplaceable. He was a backbone for the tennis community, a beloved member that received heartfelt messages after his passing of so many tennis players. That was that big, was his mark, the mark that he left, the legacy that he has carried, and the legacy that we're trying to carry as well throughout the next podcast, because as you said, I feel like there's no better way to pay homage, to pay tribute to him than to keep the show going, to keep the show rocking, That's what he would have wished. That's what he would have liked for sure. And, it's kind of a closing, a chapter closing, because he started the podcast with Carlos, still with a lot of tools to refine within his box, within his game. And look at the player he has become now. Being the youngest career Grand Slam winner in the history of tennis. He has become a member of the Tennis Olympus, and it happened the same month that Damian went to eternity. So that's it's fitting. We'll carry his legacy and we'll honor him in each and every episode that we make. Everyone goes for him. Every single episode goes for him, and tries to honor him and his legacy. And yeah, it is a pleasure, and we'll keep his willingness to make tennis a better sport and make the tennis ecosystem a better place with us in every single episode. So in honor of Damian Kust, let's keep it rolling. And yeah, just hopefully everyone listening to us keep a little prayer for him tonight, and remembering everything he did and everything he achieved.
Very, very, very well said. And of course, the month of January was big because we had Poland winning the United Cup, which is something that, Damian, I'm sure he was smiling from up above wherever he is. That is very fitting, especially in the weeks of his eternity, as you said. And then for Carlos to complete this feat and join the likes of the big three and Rod Laver in 1969 and Andre Agassi. And this is all just from the Open era. But what he has achieved here, winning 7 Slam titles at the age of 22, and winning his first final on basically every different major that he played and won. And to think that since we started the show in May of 2023, after he won Madrid, which was, I believe, at the time his third Masters 1000 title, and he had already been number one. But obviously, to see the many iterations and evolutions of Alcaraz in that period in the last 3 years, it's been something quite fantastic to witness. And the pace at which he keeps learning and growing and evolving in his game, while already being blessed with a a toolbox that obviously he's worked extremely hard for. And we're going to talk about Juan Carlos Ferrero there, but there as well, since that was a big topic coming in. But Ferrero has known him since he was and has really developed in has been a part of his developmental years, I should say. And so for him to for Carlos to to do this one without Ferrero by his side, but also the likes of Samuel Lopez and everyone else, it's a huge breakthrough, and in some ways, a completion of the young Carlos Alcaraz from the phenom to now. And so, for him to do this in the manner that he did, obviously, coming back from the brink in the semifinals and, overcoming, beating the two players that basically stopped him from going further than the quarterfinals in a row, right? Zverev in 2024 and Djokovic.
Everything has come full cycle, Vansh. Everything has come full cycle, because to do so by beating the two players that denied an entry to the semifinals in the last couple of Australian Open is like, closing the circle. Everything has come full cycle, as you said. And we have seen a young knight, a young prince, become the undisputed king, which is always a beautiful moment to witness, because it will go down as one of the most historical moments. Sunday's final was probably one of the most historically loaded finals of the last decades, so to say. And honestly, what you were saying, about Carlos, all the tools that he has in his box, how complete he has become throughout the last months. For me, it begs the question, and I don't think it's a far-fetched question. There are many things that may seem far-fetched regarding Carlos that are not as of now. And the question is whether Carlos Alcaraz is the most complete player ever at the age of 22 years, or being 22 years old. I think it's fair to say that he's the most complete player ever at his age, at least the ones that we have seen, because I didn't have the chance to watch Borg live or Rod Laver live, but those are all the times, at least from this century, I believe, because Rafa maybe achieved, he was on par and on the same track as Carlos is right now, several achievements that are very similar, but of course Rafa had his own backyard, which was clay court, but I don't think he was as complete and had so many ways of winning points, of beating your opponents, combining that, mixing that up with a mentality that is a winning mentality. He thrives under pressure. He loves the 5-setters. He loves to solve the puzzle of his rivals right now. I think he is the most complete player ever at 22 years old. He has shown that. Of course, the road is still very, very long. There are many, many Grand Slam tournaments, and we have seen breakthroughs such as Djokovic, which at one point was 15 Grand Slams below Federer in the list, and he ended up surpassing him. So, there's plenty of things to enjoy and to achieve. But as of now, as being a 22-year-old, I believe Carlos Alcaraz is the most complete player we've ever seen at his age.
I don't think that's a hot take, or you're not going to have any disagreements really from majority of people, I would say, making something like this. When I describe Carlos to people who don't follow tennis and not in the same bubble as us, or maybe will only watch the majors or have just heard of the household names, I always tell
casuals.
them,
say it out loud, Vansh. Sorry, the casuals. Yeah,
the casuals.
Go.
They people like the casual fans. I always say that Carlos is like, if you took the big three, and if they had a baby, let's say, if they had a baby, and you
a nepo baby, the nepo baby of the big three.
yeah, and he's gained the appreciation from all three, and obviously, the way he is kind of taken the best attributes of their game and molded it into an identity of his own. Is just
I agree.
something else to withhold, because he's basically taking that and elevating it to the next level. When in today's era where you said him being the most complete. The best example I can think of is people have to debate what his best surface is. You weren't debating that with the big three, right? Like you knew essentially that for Rafa it was no question it was clay. For Novak it was it was hard courts, and then later on in his career grass. And for Federer it was the same, and he was and Rafa was the undisputed king and goat of clay. But for Carlos it's like now at one point last year there were a lot of narratives. Is he the best hard court player? Has Sinner just completely taken over on hard courts? And now having won the last two hard court slams, and how equal his distribution is relative to, obviously grass being so short, a short part of the year, but just how equally dominant he's become on all surfaces, and how much of his lore has just grown with these big matches, right? We talk about his 5 set record being 15-1 in 5 set matches, or the fact that he's 7-1 in major finals, or 8-1 in Masters 1000 finals, and the fact that he's the youngest to achieve so many things, right? From becoming number one to winning the Channel Slam in 2024 to doing
Yes.
this. It just adds to the lore and aura of Carlos that opponents feel across the other side of the net. Opponents such as his three biggest rivals, Djokovic, Sinner, Zverev. I would say right now those are his three biggest rivals
Yeah.
at this point in time. And the way he's managed to sort of either flip the head-to-heads or win the big matches. I mean, I was thinking about this yesterday. I don't think there's a single player who's beaten Carlos more than twice in a row so far in his career, aside from like Felix at the very start. But one of those
Yes.
matches wasn't even a completed match. So like the fact that he's always learning and growing and adapting, and almost doesn't make the same mistakes twice and just learns in record time. I don't think it's unlike anything I've ever seen before. And obviously Bjorn Borg is a guy who gets left out in a lot of the discussions. And back then the surfaces were so different. Now the surfaces are much more homogenized, meaning you can essentially play a similar brand of tennis and do what these guys are doing, like the big three and so many, the big three. And I'm assuming Yannick will join that discussion later once he wins a Roland Garros title.
Yeah.
But essentially back then, Borg was having to play a very different game on grass, serving and volleying, and then playing from the baseline on clay. So I can't really speak to that much. I've only just seen YouTube videos, and obviously, historians can comment on that more than me. But as far as your statement goes, I'm 100% agreement. It's the most complete player I've ever seen at this age.
It just feels like he's the complete package right now. And let me chime in on that big three comparison, because as you said, it feels like he's taking the best parts of each and every player of the big three and just molded it into the same player, fitting into a human body. But there's something different about Carlos Alcaraz compared to the big three. And let me reflect on that, because this is something that I was thinking after he won the Australian Open, and it's more related to his personality. It's more personality wise than tennis wise, but I feel like it's very telling of who Carlos is, because within the big three you had Djokovic and Rafa, who had this kind of warrior mentality, who just pushes you to your absolute limit when you are watching them. They are big role models, big examples, because they would never give up on court. They would play like 5 hours matches, and you would feel like up until the last ball they had a chance of winning. And this absolutely gritty and just never give up attitude, that made you fall in love in tennis. That was their way to making you fall in love in tennis. Then you had Roger Federer. Roger maybe didn't have that ultra grind, never give up mentality on him, which I believe it's a very underrated part of his career, but that's another debate. What set Federer apart? His effortless play. The fact that you saw him play and you felt that he was toying with his rivals without sweating. There wasn't a single drop of sweat on his body. He was playing like if God had disguised himself as a tennis player and said, I'm going to play tennis, I'm going to be Roger Federer. So that was his way of making you fall in love with tennis. But now we have Carlos Alcaraz. And I believe Carlos Alcaraz, what is Carlos Alcaraz's way of making you fall in love with tennis? It's the fact that you saw him play and he's sharing his laughter and his joy of playing this sport with you. He's smiling after every single point. Even if he loses the point, even if he concedes a point for whatever reason, he's smiling. He's making you feel like this sport is enjoyable. This sport, you watch a Carlos Alcaraz match and you want to pick up a racket after the match, not because you're going to do his trick shots or you're going to volley like him or you're going to play those unbelievable thunderous forehands. It's because he makes you feel like, wow, you're going to enjoy a lot playing tennis. You're going to have so much fun playing tennis. And when he does this, being 3-5 down in his 5th set against Alexander Zverev, when he's on the brink of losing, that everyone would be, you'd see Djokovic and Rafa face and they would be ultra locked in. They would have this warrior killer mentality of, I'm never going to give up until the match is finished. But Carlos, his way, his experience in a tennis court is completely different. He is as if he's not caring at all, because he's just enjoying every single second he's staying on court. And that is his natural charisma, and that is his way of pulling in so many casuals, so many people that are watching his matches and saying, wow, this guy, okay, let's play tennis because we all want to be like Alcaraz, within our fields of work, right? We want to enjoy without feeling the burden of work. And that's what he does. And that's what I believe sets him apart in comparison to the big three and every single player that has played tennis before.
No, very well said. And it's the levity in those big moments that he shows where he, gets the crowd behind him, or he'll lose a big point against one of his rivals and he will smile and he will enjoy that. He will enjoy the experience of that point. And, from that standpoint, he's very artistic and very kind of, like when I think of Roger, I think of like the attacking aggressive mindset that he had, combined with like the improvisational instinct, some of the things that he could do with the racket that just made you feel like you're watching a wizard or you're watching they would say like waving his Wilson wand or something, right? Like
waving his Wilson wand. That was a very good commentating. Yeah.
Yes, and I feel like Carlos and it's fitting because we're talking about the big three because the tournament started with Federer coming back to the Australian Open after 6 years, and he says in his press conference that he sees Carlos in some ways in his own skin, like he kind of sees and relates to Carlos in some of the things that he does on the court, such as when to play a drop shot, when to do those things. Like those things on the fly that he's doing are just so unpredictable that it's like he most of the time he doesn't even know what he's going to do, and it's kind of sort of coming to him at the last second. And you combine that with the fact that he has like the same attitude and fighting spirit and humility as Rafa, and then the sliding and the court coverage and the way he's the dynamic movement, the backhand on the stretch.
Yeah.
Even the hairstyle is very similar to Novak. And then he's got the Andy Murray lobs going as well. Like it's just you watch this guy play and it's like he has so much inner belief in his abilities. You will see him say that he always believes that he can come back and win, and no matter what the scoreline is, and it just adds to the lore. Like you just know that he's so hard to put away, and he's never really going to give up. And the Zverev match is a perfect example, right? He suffers from the cramps. I guess we can just talk about that since that really was the pivot point of this tournament. That is what I will remember. The moment that he almost exited, right?
Turning point, yeah.
And you can talk about the first two sets, how by his standards, I don't even think he was playing his best tennis, actually quite far from it. But he was just winning some big points. And, the fact that he kind of stole that second set from Zverev, right? Down 2-5, 30 all, and Zverev serves for it, and he misses a backhand volley at 5 all. Like there were a lot of chances for it to be 1 set all. And, they're playing in a hot day, 30 degrees Celsius, but at the same time, the match looked like it was going to be a fairly straightforward match, right? Like maybe straight sets, maybe maximum 4 if Zverev wins the third set tiebreak. And it's 4 all in the third set, and we see Carlos kind of, I believe, going after it was a forehand maybe, right, that he was going after, and we see him kind of pull over, and it seems like, oh no, he's hurt his groin and tweaked it. And all of a sudden he gets out of that game, but he still holds, and each time he finds himself 2 points away from still winning in straights, despite struggling with obvious cramps. But at this point, he didn't know that it was cramps. And so he calls the physio and, he gets it worked on. And we're still wondering, is it a groin injury? Is it is it some form of cramping? I mean, of course, later it became kind of obvious that it was indeed cramps. But I think just the fact that he was still able to play insane tennis, despite the cramping, the fact that he held serve all the way through to the fourth set, and kind of, you could say that, okay, maybe Zverev let him off the hook at times, and he was able to hit kind of stationary positions. He was able to hit winners. And just kind of, I was just laughing at it because I was like, he could still win this in 4. Like he was up a mini break in the fourth set tiebreak, and it's just like he just knew that if I buy myself enough time, the pickle juice will kick in. Eventually, I will be able to get closer and closer to 100% by the time the fifth set comes around. The problem for him, though, is that in the fifth set is when Zverev played his best tennis.
Exactly.
So the first 8 games of the fifth set, I've never seen Zverev's forehand hold up as well as it did. He was getting the better of the forehand-to-forehand exchanges versus Carlos, and actually playing, because Alexander Zverev, he's known for being the best guy to have not won a slam at this point, and basically, in the big moments, not going after his shots. Well, in this match, you can't even criticize him because the first 8 games he was going after his shots, and he was actually hitting the ball with a lot of conviction and a lot of purpose. And it seemed like, even for Carlos Alcaraz, I thought this was going to be in danger. He might go 15-2 now or 14-2, in 5 setters. And I thought, but something just happened when Zverev served for the fifth set at 5-4. You just knew that Carlos has this memory bank.
Yes.
And
you knew.
You knew a combination of Zverev's history and scar tissue in
Exactly.
the big moments,
Exactly.
and you knew how Carlos was going to play absolutely fearless. And boy, when he pulled that match out, and when he started moving as well as he was in the middle of the fifth set, and you knew he was creating chances. He kept getting to break points, and against for most players, that would have been the most discouraging thing. I think even some members of the big three, you put them in that position where they have not converted those break chances. I mean, many of them don't. Many of them don't turn that match around the way he did. So
True.
for him to come back and win those last four games, and it took so much out of him, and it just added to it all. I mean,
Yeah, it's a brilliant next topic because I think we are everything is flowing slowly within this podcast because we were mentioning the great attributes of his game and his mentality. Well, this match encapsulates this, that Carlos Alcaraz is not only flashy game style and this laughter when he's playing tennis, he's also a player able to adapt to the different flows of a match and win a match, not only coming from behind, but making that adaptation work, so to say, that he hasn't been able to do as usually as he did in this Australian Open in the past, because of course you saw the two first sets, they weren't great in terms of the level of tennis. They weren't great, let's be honest. Carlos wasn't serving as well as he did against Domino. He was leaking that, enforced error from time to time here and there that made the match feel like it was close, but without both players playing their best. Sasha had his chances on the second set, but then the cramps kick in, And this is when you have to make a decision about how are you going to handle this situation. And Carlos handled it like a pro. He didn't even need to take a medical timeout or whatever. I was surprised that before the start of the fifth set, he didn't even go to the toilet or he didn't even go to the locker room. I was honestly really surprised. I thought he should have done that because you are buying yourself 10 minutes of extra rest for your cramps to go away. But he's so confident in himself that he thought he didn't need it. Okay, I agree that Zverev played a terrible first set. I don't know how he got that tie break done because honestly I thought that Alcaraz was gonna win it in one leg on a straight sets, which would have been straight humiliation from Sasha. At least I'm glad that he avoided that. The fourth set, Carlos Alcaraz was recovering, but the way he was playing, the way he was handling the situation, it was perfect because he was just going for the serve plus one shot, serve plus 1 point, hitting the slider, the serve out wide, the slider, he was hitting it perfectly so he could set up a short ball for his forehand to just finish the point. Whether it's a winner, whether it's an enforced error, I don't mind. I want short points while my legs are, recovering. He bought himself enough time to be physically ready for the fifth set. And he had to be physically ready for the fifth set. As you said, probably he was also a bit surprised at how well Sasha started playing that deciding set because we are not used to seeing that, let's be honest. And frankly, I was astonished by Sasha game. He also pulled off a very long game. I don't remember exactly the game, but it was like 5-3 or 3-2 while he was leading. Yeah. Yes, he had a couple of break points. Carlos had a couple of break points and he held serve brilliantly. So at that point I thought, well, maybe this is the
forehand winner down the line.
Yes.
That just blew my mind because I was like, normally you don't.
Absolutely. And he saved a couple of break points with big serving and holding his ground, in those forehand cross-court exchanges. So I thought, when he was 5-3 and he was off the hook during these service games, I thought, well, maybe this is the Sasha's moment. Maybe this is the time where he breaks through. Maybe this is the time where we forget about all his, let's say, questionable performances in the past. But oh boy, he said in the press conference that his legs gave in. I thought that his legs also gave in. That's true. But it wasn't only his legs. It was Carlos playing the exact shots at the exact moment, being rock solid and making Sasha work for every single point when both his legs and his mind weren't fit for the challenge, And when Carlos broke and it was 5-0, I thought internally, this is not going to the super tiebreak. He's going to win it 7-5 because now he has the legs, he has the momentum, he has the confidence, and Sasha is cooked mentally and physically. And that's a test of endurance that I think encapsulates perfectly Alcaraz's evolution mentally and tactically. And then you had the final, who was the cherry on top, because that's how he won this Australian Open, adapting himself to both the timing of the match, the timing of his opponent, and just putting aside those flashy, out of his skin performances that he had in the US Open and Tokyo. This was a tactical, intelligent approach to a tournament, and I think it makes the win, the title, even sweeter. At least in my opinion.
No. Very, very, very true. And the thing that I liked about the fourth set is that he was celebrating the little wins along the way. So what I mean is that, when he was holding serve, when he was playing a good point, whatever it was, wherever he was fighting, whenever he was coming up with drop shot winners or forehands in the open court, he was celebrating. He was getting that positive reinforcement from his team, or from Samuel Lopez, or there was an aura and confidence about him. Like, I can still win this. I can come back and I can weather the storm. And like even in that game where he holds for 4-5 and then then Zverev is serving for the match. I mean, that's when you really see him come alive, because at that moment at 5-6, even when Zverev had a game point to take it to a 10-point tiebreak, you're still thinking, like, I mean, gee, he's lost the last couple of tiebreaks. It's going to take even more of an ordeal effort to win a 10-point tiebreak at this moment. And if Zverev holds here, like, it's still up in the air a little bit. But the fact that Alcaraz in those moments, I feel like he has his own version of lockdown mode. So, for example, Djokovic in tiebreaks, and he just refuses to miss, right? And he just, for several years and his entire career, he's had this mode where he's just so rock solid and just doesn't give anything away while maintaining aggression. I feel like Alcaraz has learned to do that over and over again now, to where it's become second nature for him in the big moments to just rely on that, because he's such a good athlete. He's so fast. He's so good at forcing you to create pace and overplay that you see Zverev miss that forehand and set in. He had to do all the creation on his own, right? He had to create from this really high loopy shot that Alcaraz isn't really, he's not injecting pace into that. He's not like going for a flashy winner now. Like, maybe he would have, maybe 2 years ago he would have gone for something that he shouldn't have gone for. And maybe
playing big.
Like maybe he overhits in that moments. But now I feel like he's so airtight, in the sense he knows when to pull back, when to actually rely on that courage, and he always has both options in the locker.
I think you could clearly see that in the final match. For me, how he recovered by playing that percentage tennis and putting aside a little bit his accelerating shot making, let's sort of say, that was the thing that made you feel in awe about his tennis. How much he has been able to make that leap mentally, to adapt and to tactically choose the right game plan for, and on the fly, as you said, he's making improvements on the fly. I think the final, what you were saying, you could see it in the Zverev match, but I saw it clearly in the title match, more clearly.
100%. People talk about variety, and they always think of slice, or they think of drop shot, or they think of coming forward, or because that's sexy, that's appealing to the eye. It's
also the trajectory of the ball and the pace and the weight.
Exactly. It's also about how he those high looping shots are so effective, or the way he changes directions when hitting the the slice down the line, or the way he gives you different looks for every single shot. And sort of on defense as well, you can use variety, right? Like, you can, in the way that you defend and you shrink the court. That was super, super impressive in the final, how he was able to do that from, let's be honest, a red hot Djokovic who left off where he came from against Sinner, winning the fourth and fifth set, saving all those break points. I think you could make a case that first set that Novak played, obviously, that level of aggression is going to be unsustainable no matter how great you are. But if you just look at the stats and you look at the eye test of how Djokovic played that first set in the final, like, if he keeps that level up, and
he came with a perfect tactic as well, Djokovic.
Yeah. Just redlining and playing that kind of brand of tennis. For Carlos, he was smart enough to know that if there was a little bit of a dip there at the start of the second, but Djokovic, which he said in his press conference, there was one net court that also went his way, but for the most part, it was a couple of loose errors, and that's all it really took. And all of a sudden, he started to believe, and he started to think that I can actually do what Djokovic has done to everybody else for 15 years. I can now turn that back on him and see how he responds. And and when you're 38, 39 years old, you've just come off of a 5-setter. It doesn't matter how great you are in finals, or how at some point that physicality is just going to be too much And I think Carlos
Yeah.
realized that, and he just did exactly what he had to do the last 2 sets and 3 sets. I mean, I love the fourth set because that's when we finally saw them playing well at the same time. But in the second and third, it's just the error count went way down, like from Carlos, and he just gave Djokovic a couple new different looks, and he said, "Okay, you hit through me. I'm a wall," you know,
Exactly.
and basically that's how he won. And it was just it was seeing that role reversal in real time, and we've seen him come back from a set down against Djokovic in 2023 Wimbledon, but that match had a totally different complexion. It was on,
Yes,
it's not
I
really
agree.
comparable to this. So to see this iteration of Carlos in real time in a major final against his biggest rival outside of Yannick, like, oh, I mean, what
He
can you say?
he basically Djokovic the Djokovic, right? He gave him a taste of his own medicine, and I was going to tell you that he said it very clearly in. I was watching his post-match interview with Eurosport Spain. They were airing it here, and he said basically what you were saying. He found an ultra uber aggressive Novak Djokovic playing lights out. Of course, you know that it wasn't going to be sustainable for 3 hours because he was coming off also 4 hours of not all the 4 hours, but let's say out of those 4 hours in the semifinal, maybe two were also red lights out, sorry, tennis. So you had three lights out tennis, 3 hours of lights out tennis from Novak Djokovic. It's very difficult to sustain that when you are almost 39 years old. So Carlos said, what was he thinking at the beginning of the second set? Okay, let's relax, let's settle within this match, and let's wait because he's going to give you maybe a couple of looks. He's going to give you he's going to miss a couple of forehands, and then you're going to have your chance. And he was thinking, okay, what am I technically changing? Okay, so I'm going to put one ball in, then another. I'm going to give him, a ball after ball after ball, and let's wait until there's, as you said, a dip on his level. Let's wait until there's something creaks in the wall, And in the very first game of that second set, Djokovic hit a couple of unforced errors, Carlos broke, and he saw that straight away. And he sensed that, okay, this guy is beatable. This guy is not going to play the whole match the way he did in the first set. But he gave himself that chance by believing in himself and having that attitude of not missing a single ball and just waiting for Novak Djokovic to dip a bit his level and give him a clear chance, a clear look, and just going straight into the match, And that's what we were saying about Alcaraz evolution. He had the chance to prove to the world in the biggest stage that he is also able to win by adapting himself to his rival, by winning ugly, by being rock solid, by hitting those cross-court backhands that left Djokovic no space or left him out of his desirable position of creating pace. He had to work with a completely different ball, and it was much more difficult for Novak to create angles and to create pace off his backhand instead of his forehand, because Alcaraz was adamant in just hitting through Novak's cross-court forehand in the first set, and that wasn't the right tactic. So he took a step back on the return. Let's play the looping ball, so Novak doesn't have the chance to attack the serve plus one ball, and then let's move him, let's pin him into the backhand side until I can hit maybe the inside out forehand or the sided forehand. Maybe I can hit the down the line backhand, but let's pin him in that cross court backhand exchanges where it's much more difficult for him to generate pace and to generate angles. And in that way, he frustrated Djokovic, really frustrated him. The enforced errors from Novak started to leak in. The legs were not explosive as they were in the first set, and Carlos just kept that intensity, kept that level, kept that ceiling. And when he found some more difficulties in the fourth set, whenever Djokovic had the chance to, change the momentum of the match, Carlos shut him down very quickly, whether it was with a serve plus one combination, whether it was with a booming forehand, or whether it was with a, let's say, labored rally that also, let's say, took 2 games out of Djokovic's legs. It was not the perfect, not the flashy, not the lights out performance that you would expect maybe from Carlos in a final, but it was that composed, mature enough performance that sets the legends apart from the very good tennis players. And there's no better way to win a career Grand Slam that by doing so in that fashion.
Yeah, I mean, mature is an awesome way to describe it. And, like in the first set, it reminded me of some of his matches with Yannick where it's like a baseline slugfest, right? And you want to get out of that, Carlos, because you don't want to be going blow for blow with people who have, really good timing and precision. And, can just place the ball on a dime and change directions, and you're having to play. You're basically taken aback by their pace and quality. And so, what Carlos did, working the angles in the second and third and fourth, like using the width of the court, I really found that to be a game changer when he was taking those cross court forehand angles and making
Yes,
Djokovic
as well.
short. That was a little short, like tailing away from Novak and making him create something from way out of position. Like, one shot that I don't think will like be in the highlights, but like, 1-2 30 all in the third set is like a perfect
Mhm.
example of him just using the short angle and getting Djokovic out of position. And it's not it's like a forced error from Djokovic, but it just puts this extra layer of thought in Djokovic's mind that I have to basically hit this perfect and hit it close to the lines, or I'm going to be
So
running.
he's trying to create that angle. Yes, 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 yes.
And also that around the net post shot that Novak comes up with,
Mhm. I
that would have
remember
been the
that
winner
point.
against everyone else. That it maybe can go down as one of the best points played by the loser in a rally. Hitting an inside and hitting a backhand around the net post and not winning the point is like in tennis, like one of the best points I've seen from the guy who didn't actually win the rally. It's
Yeah,
like, and it's the accumulation of all those little things that Carlos did that just eventually, I think, took its toll. But like, last year when he went up a set on Djokovic in the quarters, he
yes,
didn't have that same level of ruthlessness or discipline to put Novak
true.
away when he was struggling physically. Whereas here, every time Djokovic had a foothold, or every time he got something going in the fourth set, when he was playing inspired, when the crowd was behind him, when things were lining up really nicely for him to, make a comeback. And obviously, Djokovic will regret the forehand that he had at 4-all 30-40 mid-court. There's no doubt about it. He would want that point back. But there were so many other
But
moments before that.
it's just one small chance.
And let's be honest, after that he didn't really have much of a shot. Like after the 24 ball rally that Carlos won in the first point of the last game, that basically took Djokovic's soul away. I mean, we heard Andy
Yes.
Roddick say in 2021 at the US Open, first he takes your legs, then he takes your soul. Like, that's what Alcaraz just did here. He basically just did that to Djokovic, what Djokovic does to everybody else. So, for him to kind of, I mean, that just added to it all, that he was able to win in yet another different way. We saw him win with his perfect tennis at the US Open, where that's the best tennis he's ever played from the first point of the major to the last point. Like,
Absolutely,
and then
absolutely.
we saw another version of him here, which was very efficient till the semis, winning a few tiebreaks, which just gives him more time to practice his clutch gene, because
Yes,
I feel like the more practice that you have in these kind of clutch situations, the more you can really come through when it counts. And I think that's the big thing about Carlos, is just that in his already short young career, he has so many examples of moments. The Roland Garros final being the number one, where he can come back from any possible position. And when you have that in your memory brain, along with all the other tools, that's how you become the GOAT. Like, that's how you're right now. He's the baby GOAT, but that's how you become, like,
no, it's
well,
not far fetched to say that he's aiming for the GOAT status,
yeah,
and
he wants to sit at the same table as the big three, and
yeah, for sure,
and
for sure.
so there's no doubt he's in that direction. So
Exactly. You look at the future, and this version of Alcaraz, just so composed within a match, composed within a tournament. Who's beating him? It takes a lights out 4 hour Novak Djokovic to beat him, but of course he isn't going to be able to just reach the semifinal or the final without some physical uh, wear and tear, because he has to come through a first week of a Grand Slam, and this one he didn't even play a match, so he had less wear and tear than maybe at some other tournaments. Then you have Jannik Sinner,
yeah,
which of course it's his main rival, is the antagonist of this story, of course, in a very respectful way. There's no bad blood. There's no feuds between them. Although at some point I would love to have bad blood between them, because it would make the rivalry a bit more interesting. I know this is not very
they love each
politically
other
correct to say, but I don't know. I hope at some point Carlos steals his girlfriend or whatever. I would
They're
love
too
that.
much
I
in
would love
love right now. They're in
yeah,
their honeymoon
yeah,
phase.
there's too much love, man. There's too much love. We want a little bit of a little bit of rivalry, but also in the strict sense of the word. No, but of course you have seen it, but you couldn't have more contrasting records and contrasting how to call it, attitudes towards the end of a match that Carlos and Sinner right now, because Sinner he has lost, I believe it's his 6 out of his last 7 matches that have gone to a fifth set, sorry. And Carlos is 15-1, I believe, in his
I think
in his
6
fifth
11
set record.
6-11 setters, and actually he's never won a match over 3 hours and 50 minutes.
Yeah, which is crazy.
He's like 0 for 9 or something. And I think earlier in his career, you could chalk that up to, okay, physically he was just, he couldn't last. He wasn't like durably there physically.
He has improved physically and still hasn't been able to.
And so I think in these last couple of matches, the Roland Garros final and the Novak semi, the legs were there. The physicality was there.
Yeah.
It's just the big point play where he got outmatched and outclutched.
I agree.
By
with you.
The most clutch players in history.
But he'll get there, eh? He'll get there. I have no doubts that he'll get there.
This stat is not going to remain 0 for 9. He will correct this.
Yes.
It's just that he has very little opportunities to show it, right? Because he's so dominant and he's so... It's a compliment to him in a way because he's so efficient and he wins so many matches so easily. It's so hard to get him to that point, Like he's won majors. The first 3 majors that he won, before Wimbledon, was just like
steamrolling.
At no point was that ever tested. Even the 2 sets to love comeback that he had against Medvedev hit a wall physically. Like after
to separate matches within one match. I agree.
So he hasn't really had the chance to prove that yet, like in a big way. Apart from these last 2 like losses, but ultimately you would expect it would revert to the mean at some point. But it is true. It's a very contrasting way, and Carlos I think has a lot more practice, a lot more he has so much more unpredictability in those moments. Like you look at Jannik, the way he's defending, and his stock game is so good. Like surviving that is impossible for 99.7 or 8% of the players. But when you have the arsenal of Carlos and the way that Novak was able to play those big points. He saved 16 out of 18 break points and like 8 of them in the 5th set. And he just came up with something I would say extraordinary on like 12 of them. Maybe there's a few shots that obviously Sinner would want back. 1 second serve return, I remember in particular in the 5th. But so I think it's cool in a way because for the first time in a long time, like there's question marks about Jannik, right? Like he kind of tore through the second, like post US Open, he just tore through the rest of the year, right? And it was kind of like, oh, who's going to stop him in Australia? Who's going to, he's the best hardcourt player. And all of a sudden now there's some doubts, there's some question marks. Now he's the chaser in a big way.
Yes.
Whereas now it's like now the pressure goes back to Carlos to win 3 in a row at RG, and it's like the roles are reversed. So it's going to be very fascinating to see the clay court season and see Sinner. I think he's the most interesting player to watch come Indian Wells and the clay court swing, given that he missed these tournaments last year, but also that he's going to want the career slam. He's going to be more hungry, I think.
Yeah. No, I think what makes this rivalry fascinating, in spite of the bad blood, which is not there now, but in all honesty, jokes aside, what makes this rivalry fascinating is the fact that whenever there's, whether it's Carlos or Jannik, that make a move, his rival immediately makes another move to counterpart that one.
They're training just for each other at this point. They're so far ahead of the rest of the tour. They only think about how to beat the other. Right.
Yes. They're trading blows.
Yeah.
And you can see the blows, but those are within there's those little periods of no competition between, I don't know, Australia and Indian Wells, then the clay season and the grass season. Then Jannik loses in the US Open against Carlos, and he's adamant that he has to make a few technical tweaks to his first serve because his first serve wasn't working as well in the US Open. That's what makes this rivalry interesting, And I believe that now Sinner's not breaking point, but Sinner's part of the game in where he needs to invest more work is to have a couple of more different plan B, plan C, plan D, whenever his A game is not steamrolling his opponent, and whenever he might find himself lured into a 5th or 4th set and he has to rely on a couple of more different ball choices because he thought in the semifinals, okay, maybe it's enough to just keep playing my game and Novak will wear himself out of this match and will be enough tired to just bail out of this match. But Novak didn't. Novak was hitting as well as he has ever hit in the last couple of years, and that made Jannik's base game futile. It wasn't enough for Jannik, and he has to learn how to, whenever he's on a 4th or 5th set, make a couple of tactical changes to maybe add some more spin to the ball, create these short angles, move the rival from side to side, and just don't over rely on his base game, which is enough against 95% of the ATP circuit, but not against Carlos Alcaraz and a red hot Novak Djokovic, and those are his learning experiences from his Australian Open, and I'm sure he's gonna come back stronger than ever, and I wouldn't be surprised, and I honestly believe he has a great shot at winning Roland Garros and completing the career slam, which would close the chapter on both the main characters of this tennis era, that we're living in.
Completing tennis one by one.
Yeah, I think it's fitting, actually. It's fitting for both of them, yeah.
It is, but what's so striking about that semifinal is just, this post-prime physical version of Novak, how much he is able to kind of compensate for his decline in speed, right? And his decline in anticipation and movement. That's what goes when you're the older that you get. But, the result is just you have this hyper-offensive player who's serving out of his mind. Like his pinpoint serving has just gone crazy good the last 2 or 3 years. It's a huge part of why he's so good now. And also the way that he's able to kind of time his surges and matches, like the way he took parts of that match off a little bit.
Yeah.
I think what was very important is that he didn't go down 4-love. I actually believe that if he went down 4-love in the first set wins at 6-1, 6-2, I don't think he wins. But the fact that he just stayed in touching distance, he just kept applying that pressure, you knew that eventually, there was still something left in the tank, and that's because he had a little bit of extra. He had a little bit of help. There's no doubt about it. The Musetti, actually a lot of help. The Menschik withdrawal and the Musetti retirement, that really made it so that he could actually come back in this match, and he could actually just turn the tables in the last 2 sets. He had enough left in the tank that he could win the longer rallies against Yannick. Like he won the 9+ shot rallies, and he just timed it really well. And obviously he took risks, but they felt like risks that could that were leading to a win, because the way he was timing his down the line accelerations, the way he was going early, and he was finding space, and he was forcing Sinner to go play a little bit extra closer to the lines, and kind of forcing Yannick to play out of his comfort zone. That is a huge shift from what we've seen in their rivalry, and the fact that he hasn't been able to go toe to toe with Sinner from the back of the court and last physically in their last 5 meetings. I mean, this is a guy who really had his number. And so for Djokovic to kind of turn that around and remind everyone that, hey, it wasn't just against Carlos at the Olympics. It wasn't just Carlos at the Australian Open last year, but now I actually did it against the Djokovic 2.0. Like I did it against the guy who, is, playing at
his number last year.
And playing at a faster tempo and doing what I do, but just a modern version of it. So for him to do that and then even come as close as he did in the final, I mean, just insane stuff. So I just
with Djokovic, there's something, whenever, even at this point in time, you feel like he has nothing left to prove, but he's always willing to prove something to himself. And in this Australian Open, he had to prove to himself that he's still able to beat players such as Sinner or Alcaraz, even at 28 years old, and that was important for him. I feel like his match against Sinner in the semifinal was like a love letter to tennis, a poem to the sport he loves, because he left it all on the court in circumstances that I feel like no one could have envisioned, because, I mean, the odds were at some point like 9.0 to Djokovic, right?
I don't think he's ever been a bigger underdog in his
exactly.
life. And he wasn't going into that final.
I had never seen Djokovic so high on the bookies as in this one. And rightly so, because Musetti's cramp were the only reason why he was in the semifinals. Let's be honest. He was losing that match.
The fact that he can go from that level that we saw against Lorenzo and being out of the tournament to then,
in the match against Lorenzo, Vansh, he couldn't hit through the court at all with his forehand. Yeah. It was just painful to see him trying to accelerate, as you said, but getting no reward at all. And against Sinner, you have to accelerate and to inject a lot of pace to the ball if you want to win against him. But we hadn't seen that from him, like, I don't know, months, years. I feel like the serving of Novak throughout this Australian Open reminded me a lot of his 2020 version of himself, because I remember I don't know if you remember, but the final against Dominic Thiem, he was also 1-2 love. He was 1-2 down, so to say.
Yes.
same circumstances against Sinner, and he was serving out of his skin to come back from that match. Happened very similar in a very similar way.
Second serve and volley on one of the break points.
Yeah, true.
Which he would have went on break in the fourth, and then you never know.
Relying a lot on that serve, he this version, as you said, it feels like he's rationing out the bullshit throughout the match. Whenever he feels like he's not able to get closer in a set, okay, I'm not gonna lose much time and much sleep in this one. Let's go for the next one.
Yeah,
everything is here in his mind.
Yeah, and that's what he was able to do, because from love 3 to about like 4-all in the tiebreak, 4-all in the third set, he was staying with Sinner. But honestly, Sinner was the one who was serving way better. Sinner had one of his best serving days of his career. Like, that's the thing. He served 26 aces. He served over 70 some percent in 74% at one point. Like, and it just came down to the break points. Like, he led every single other stat in this match. It was like the 2019 Wimbledon final. But the thing about this is that in that final, you had one-sided sets, right? You had one guy winning 6-1, 6-4, and the other goat winning in tiebreaks. Here, it's like the set scores were the same. 6-3s and 6-4s, and so it wasn't like one set was like 7-6 and the other was 1-6.
They were always they were going always together.
Just one guy was having to work a lot harder to hold, and the other guy was. Wasn't and so that's.
We were talking earlier about the points won percentage of Novak. Out of the life, of the record, we were saying Novak won against Sinner 47.5% of the points in that match. Won in 5 sets. Novak against Alcaraz, he won 47% of the points. Lost in 4 sets. That's why tennis is a sport of fine, small margins, and that it's not about who wins more points, but who wins the important points. And that is kind of the gulf that separates Alcaraz and Sinner right now.
Yes.
In clutch moments in 4-5 sets. Also we discussed that earlier. I think this is a very telling stat that we left for the final part of the podcast, but it's a very telling stat of at what point of their careers Alcaraz and Sinner are when it comes to absolutely clutch 4 sets performances in Grand Slams right now.
Yeah, I mean, and also, like, it's the same case in the Alcaraz-Sinner rivalry, right? It's 10-6 for Carlos. They both won the same number of points.
Yeah, true.
But true matches. True. Yannick had match points, and Carlos won them both. And so that's the difference between it being 10-6 versus it being 8-8.
And Vansh, maybe had Sinner converted those couple of match points he had both in the US Open 2022 and of course in Roland Garros 2025, and they would be almost equal in the Grand Slam tally.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, there's a 3 Grand Slam difference, but coming to Australia, we would have a tie between them, and that is a crazy stat, my friend.
Yes. The other thing from Novak is also, he was asked a question from a reporter about chasing Yannick and Carlos. And, obviously he took that personally.
He took that personally. Yeah.
The Michael Jordan meme, he took that personally.
Absolutely. There's no better way of telling that. Yeah, I agree.
And I think that only lit a fire under him more. Not that he needed more motivation, but it's...
Yes.
It
gave him that extra fuel, extra fire, Lit a little bit of fire within himself. I agree with that,
Yeah.
And also at this time, he received probably the biggest outpouring of love that he has ever received on a tennis court by the Rod Laver Arena, because they were chanting "Nole, nole, nole" both in the semifinals and against the final, and that is something I read it, and there was a Spanish reporter that laid it down pretty beautifully and pretty well. Novak has needed to outlive them all to finally earn the respect of the people. Normally, you can live enough to die as a villain instead of a superhero, and in Novak Djokovic is the opposite. He has outlived them all to finally become a superhero and to finally be appreciated, and for his greatness to be truly recognized within the tennis community.
Yeah, and I also loved how in the post-match interview, the trophy ceremony and in the press conference, he said, it's up to me and all the other youngsters, or myself, and I'm going to play for 10 more years. And it's like little jokes like this.
Yeah.
It just shows you that that it's still
Relentless.
he's still he's still the guy really after it's
Yeah, absolutely.
this tournament just drew that home. But so for Carlos now, no Rotterdam, which obviously is a great decision, just given this achievement. And so I guess we will see him at Doha now. Is that the plan?
Yep.
Doha.
Plan is heading to Doha. He's now resting at home. He arrived in Madrid, just this morning, right this morning. Of course, a very long flight, 24-hour. He said that he didn't have the chance to go partying and celebrating. I know Nick Kyrgios was expecting him and waiting for him. I believe Kyrgios said, like, Carlos, please win this tournament so we can go partying together. Well, no partying together because his body was absolutely cooked. But he's in Murcia right now. Probably he's at home right now. He'll take this week off. Probably start training like middle end of the next week, heading to Doha, which is one of the few 500 tournaments that he has on his calendar. Now this year you only need 4 instead of 5 to get the bonus. So I think he was safe by skipping Rotterdam. It was the smart, sensible choice, to skip Rotterdam, because he would have only like a couple of days of training prior to this tournament, and the surface, the overall feel of the tournament is completely different. Rotterdam has a more gritty surface. Of course, it's indoors. If you go from Australian Open to Doha, outdoor conditions, very similar weather. It's a soft transition, so to say. It's a less demanding transition, And you have Indian Wells and Miami, where he has the chance to rack up a lot of points because he didn't have his best performances in the Sunshine Double last year and the American Swing. And honestly, with the amount of points that he is leading now in the top position of the ATP rankings, he has a great choice of. I'm not sure whether he has the chance to equal Djokovic's record of points, but of getting pretty close. At least if you have a great Indian Wells Miami run, you could be very well at 14,000 maybe, which is quite amazing for someone that was known as, inconsistent, great wizard, but sometimes inconsistent player, to be able to reach, even now, 13,000. I mean, that's a crazy amount of points,
Here we are for Carlos breaking ranking records. And this was the same guy who finished the year number 3 after winning 2 slams.
Yeah.
What a turnaround. No, really, since Monte Carlo 2025, really, I think that's, since the David Goffin loss in Miami, we have seen this version of Carlos who is just...
Both the Goffin match and the Netflix documentary unchanged the new Carlitos. I don't know. Maybe he needed that documentary to come out and people to just criticize him and say that with that approach to tennis, he's never gonna become the greatest player of all time. And he said, "Well, I'm gonna do it my way. Fuck them all. I'm really gonna do it my way." Maybe he needed that. I don't know. He needed that push. It's crazy.
Which leads us into the final topic about Carlos, which is of course the Ferrero split. You set it up so perfectly there with the documentary. I'm just taking that segue because obviously the Ferrero split that happened in December, literally like December 17th or something. So close to the Australian Open or so close to the Aussie Swing. There was so much chatter. There was so much belief in the public that this is going to be really difficult. Advantage Sinner, this is like almost impossible. He's been relying on Ferrero. And then you had other people saying that, this is a normal thing in the development of a player-coach thing. And it wasn't all rosy between them at times last year with, their sort of chemistry and on-court vibes, if you like. And there were obviously some disagreements between the, Alcaraz and the team and Ferrero and some of the philosophies, as the documentary, I think, pointed out, which I think at that time, a lot of people thought it was just kind of a sort of a media propaganda thing. But I think actually there was a decent amount of truth to it. And
yes, I agree.
And it was that's why I enjoyed that documentary, because it was something totally different than the usual happy, smiling Carlos doc that you would have maybe gone into it thinking it was. But regardless, how do you kind of see the situation now that he's won this? And obviously, I don't want to discount all the awesome things that Ferrero has brought in Carlos wouldn't be where he is today without Juan Carlos Ferrero, but also he's just fine at this point without him, and
Yeah,
has really matured in front of our eyes.
exactly. I mean, everything that surrounds the Ferrero breakup is odd. The timing of the breakup is odd because it was just a couple of days away from starting the preseason. So that left some doubts in our minds. And it was very, very well documented in Spain. Everyone was talking about this topic, everyone was having his word on his topic. But Alcaraz did a pretty good job at the beginning of the tournament by emphasizing the fact that I have the same team except one member. The rest of the
Mhm.
team stays with me. The core team that is with me on off the court is the same, is here. So I'm not gonna my level isn't gonna jump off a cliff because Ferrero is not here. Ferrero was pivotal, instrumental in making Carlitos the player he is today. That is a fact, and that cannot be disputed by the fact that Carlos has won his first Grand Slam without him. Those two things are true, but it has shown the Ferrero breakup. It has shown that Carlitos has reached a level of maturity and a level of confidence and a level of, you know, making the off-court balance great. I mean, making, balancing off-court and on-court well enough to not miss Ferrero when you are playing, when you're having to find solutions, within a match, and that is something that I personally thought that it was going to take more time for Alcaraz to
Yeah.
get through that and to maybe find solutions without looking at his boss and looking at his box, sorry, and not seeing Ferrero there. But he has impressed us all, especially considering because during this Australian Open, Ferrero did a very strange media tour, I think it was prior to the quarterfinals that he went on a couple of radio stations and a couple of media newspapers and saying that he was really missing Carlos, that it broke his heart, everything that happened, that it was very painful to watch his matches and that he wasn't even turning up the TV. That was weird. That was odd. The timing was odd because you could have easily done this after the tournament where there's nothing that could, you know, disturb Alcaraz focus, but he did a pretty good job of isolating and not listening to the noise, Carlos, I mean. And yeah, it didn't affect his performance at all, which speaks volumes about how Carlos has become this rock solid athlete, not only on court but also off court and regarding his mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people forget that last year he won 5 of the 8 tournaments that he won without Ferrero in the
With
box, right?
and with Samu, yes.
With
Also,
Samuel, and what a great
maybe
coach Samuel is, right?
let me take a moment, yeah, Vansh, to just highlight how great of a coach Samu Lopez is. Samu is a pupil of Ferrero's. He has spent plenty of time down Ferrero's wing, and he has absorbed Ferrero's knowledge and Ferrero's experience in a way that makes him one of the best coaches right now. And he's the responsible of tweaking a few things in Carlos' serve, which we haven't discussed about it, but it was also working pretty well in the final against Djokovic whenever he needed it. Those sliders out wide that he didn't have in his box of tools 2 years ago, he has that slider now, and that is very, very useful for him in the big moments. And the way that he also keeps Carlos composed during the matches. I remember during the cramp scene against Zverev, Carlos was saying to Samuel, I can't move. I can't do anything. My legs are not working. I just can't do shit on court. And he was saying, relax, don't worry, stay composed, take your time if you need, lose your set if you need, but let's keep focused. Go to the mental battle. You got this. Those words of encouragement of, just being calm and in the moment, knowing that this is gonna pass and you're gonna be fine in 40 minutes. Those are the words that he needed, and he has come through as a great coach, great mentor. And actually, when the split with Ferrero was announced, we were very, very quick jumping in and saying, let's see what super coach Carlos brings, next year. And now
Yeah.
there are no talks about any other coach than Samuel Lopez in Spain right now. And that is a true testament of how good of a coach Samu is.
Yeah, very, very well said. I mean, and also the technical improvements, the serve, the the just the way he's able to absorb pace a lot better on the backhand, and the overall kind of flow of his game, which the serve is something that he's tweaked many times, but now it's come to a point where It looks
Come
so
to fruition. Yeah.
it looks so Djokovic-esque in terms of how he's gone about it. And from my understanding, it's kind of a change that he kind of did on his own, along with some discussions with the team and Lopez, providing that valuable technical side. And it's like how Sinner has Vignosi, Carlos has Samuel Lopez, but Samuel Lopez's credentials, I think, are pretty underrated in terms of
I agree.
what he's brought to the table. And I think the levity in the big moments is very true, because I think as great as the Ferrero relationship was, there were times where it was very tense. I think Carlos probably felt that little extra pressure and added kind of, not necessarily to win for Ferrero, but more just kind of, making sure that he's like both parties are sort of, you get what I'm saying? Like Ferrero was almost so overly invested in it at times.
Yeah.
That it just added a bit of extra layer of pressure that at times I felt like was stressing Carlos out. But here in this moment, he can just go back to what he does best, which is playing on instinct, playing with feel and just staying calm in those in that moment and putting a smile on his face also when when things are maybe not always perfect. So I think that really sums it up well in terms of Carlos's Australian Open, in terms of huge discussions on Djokovic and Sinner and about the future of the rivalry. We really kind of covered it all as far as the men go. I would have loved to do a little bit more on Iga. It's just that this is the big story, and there will be other times where Iga will be the bigger topic, and we've usually not gone that long on just one player, other than if it's a player specific episode. But honestly, I mean, with regards to
we could spend another hour talking about Carlos, just how big this win was and how much everything has come into fruition, what he has done. So and time has completely flown. So no issues at all, as long as the people haven't been bored by our speeches, is more than fine,
No, I think in terms of what the people would want, they would want us to focus on these accomplishments, because the reality is both Iga and Carlos were going for the career slam, and they both have such awesome resumes right now, and that's why we lumped them together, because so much of their stats, so much of their toolbox, their athleticism, the way they've kind of taken over both tours and made the tours better in a way, like it's just it just fits so perfectly having them in the same conversation as sort of leading the future of tennis. It didn't quite work out for Iga, but then again, she lost to the eventual champion 2 years in a row.
She lost to the champion.
She lost to the eventual champion. There's no doubt that she's going to have to go back to the drawing board a little bit in terms of her. That the strength of the WTA is just such that it's so strong right now, with the likes of Sabalenka and Rybakina and Goff and Anisimova and Pegula, and her. Like, she is still in that top 6 very comfortably. So she sits at number 2 in the world, having won Wimbledon, having won Cincinnati. But since Cincinnati, I'll be honest, the biggest thing is she hasn't had the number against the fellow players inside the top 10. And so she's lost her last 4 against Coco. She's lost her last 2 against Sabalenka, 2 against Rybakina, 2 against Pegula. Andreeva's gotten the better of her. So right now, she's kind of at a midpoint where, the Victorowski,
crossroads.
The Victorowski mentality of playing every point in that same sort of efficient manner that was working earlier is just not quite the same as the Facet mentality of kind of weathering the big hitters and, bringing in extra layers of her game. But it's kind of been a tough transition for her in terms of finding that middle ground between defense and offense. So you see her kind of struggling a bit more. And I think the players inside the top 10 have a little more belief against her that, they once used to be this aura around Iga that, like, we don't want to get bageled and breadstick today.
Now it's a bit gone, yeah.
Now it's kind of gone in the other direction, but that doesn't mean she's not capable of turning it around. I mean, every tournament that she goes to, she's obviously a favorite, a big chance to win. But ultimately, I mean, it came down to a very close first set between her and Rybakina, and at 6-5, she didn't make any first serves. She made 0-4-7 first serves in that game, up 30-love. And then honestly, the match just fell over because of how sweetly and how great Rybakina is playing right now. And their head-to-head is 6-6. Rybakina has won their last 2 meetings. But I don't actually have that much to say or analyze about the state of Iga, because I think it's pretty obvious to those watching. And I think the interesting thing for me going forward with this discussion, Carlos, is just how will she take the extra time that she needs in between tournaments to work on her game? I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing. Is just that how relentless the tour has been, and she's talked about it a lot. How there are 10 Masters 1000s on the WTA, and the mandatory nature of it. I don't feel like she's had the proper time to put those things into practice that they've been working on, so it hasn't quite translated. So I'm curious to see, does she take the hit, and does she skip one of these Middle East 1000s? Does she skip Doha or Dubai? Does she take a little bit of time and just kind of retool and come back? Because that was the Sabalenka approach at times last year, and that worked well for her. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree. It will be a great time, as you said, to go back to the drawing board. But the calendar, even in the WTA, a bit more than the ATP, just it doesn't give you much space and room to think and to retool a couple of stuff, a couple of things. Yeah, the fact that it feels like Iga has lost, some parts of her identity as a player,
Yeah.
in terms of how do you want to operate on the court. Sometimes she commits to overheating. Sometimes she stays far on the back, which maybe would give her some benefits on the clay courts, but against power hitters, it has been the biggest struggle of her career. Now that she's struggling even more, it's even more visible. So it's a matter of going back to the training board and thinking, how do I want to play? What version of myself do I want to bring? Do I want to bring a same version of myself on a hardcore tournament than on a clay court tournament? Do I want to play the same against a big hitter than against the 54 in the world? How do I commit myself to playing tennis? Right now, she has so many dark clouds over her mind. Just
she's caught in between the two.
The two worlds. Yeah. And honestly, it can happen at some point. She is a generational player. She'll work it out. She'll come back stronger than ever. But it's better for her to make this happen now. She's very young. She has plenty of time to work it out than, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 more years down the road. But she has to commit to that change and to commit to just having a clear mentality of what he wants to do on court, what she wants to do on court, sorry. And with that, the results will come back. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. I mean, we saw her win Wimbledon and Cincinnati with and serving really well, like just hitting spots, hitting big first serves. Some of that has gone away.
Yeah.
And I think there's a little bit of kind of the block of time that would serve her particularly well on that shot, because that is one shot that you can control. And in this era of big hitters and sort of strong returners on the WTA, it's been tough for her to kind of find that balance, because she finds herself quite often on the back foot right after the serve, and then and she's one of the best athletes. She's one of the best movers. She has incredible footwork, maybe the best footwork that I've ever seen in a women's player. After probably just how quick she is with her feet, but she loses some of that when she engages in these in this sort of for lack of a better word, like bashing with these big hitters, because she has so much more in her game in terms of athleticism, and
to just go to toe against them. Yeah.
Just put yourself out in that kind of a fashion has been a little bit frustrating for me to personally to watch at both the United here. But hey, it's definitely something she's aware of. It's definitely something she will, if anyone can work it out, it is her, because obviously we're going to head over to the clay court season, and it wasn't her best friend at times last year, but throughout her career, it has been her. She has been like the Rafa of the WTA in terms of Roland Garros excellence and the other lead-in tournaments. So I'm curious to see where this next chapter of Iga takes us. I still very much believe in all of her abilities, and we'll have a lot more to say as far as in the future about Iga. But as far as this tournament goes, this was mostly all about Carlos Alcaraz and his great accomplishment of completing the career slam, and so many different directions we went into. And this had to be a long episode no matter what. But we've so if you're still listening to this, thanks a lot for being with us after our hiatus. And Carlos, you did such a good job. Not that I expected anything less. And such a great way to, I guess, have Carlos Navarro and Carlos Alcaraz in the same.
Yeah, I don't feel like I have the same magic as my namesake, but hey, it's been my pleasure. It is, as I said, time flies. When we are speaking, we are having these conversations, and yeah, looking forward to many, many more podcasts, and hopefully celebrating many Carlos milestones along the way.
Yeah, and another seamless transition by you, because I wanted to show our listeners that you can follow Carlos at
Yeah, let's go.
5GS on Twitter. And you can also check me out at Vansh2K. Be sure to also follow at Ego Carlos Tennis on Twitter, and we'll put that in the description of the episode as well. And give us a subscribe to us on YouTube so you can see
Shout
our
out on social media if they have enjoyed the episode. Left a comment, leave a comment here in the YouTube comment section. Why not? No, we want to hear their opinions.
And also leave us a rating and review on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, if you're listening to this while driving or doing chores or whatever it is. And so this has been our first episode of 2026, a new chapter for us, a new chapter for Carlos Alcaraz. We'll see you guys next time. So long.